Commander Azira stood on the bridge of her damaged ship. Her blue hands gripped the edge of the command console as she watched the battle outside. It was not going well. "Commander, we lost contact with Battle Group 7, said Officer Lenny. Her young face showed fear. The blue scales around her eyes were wet with tears. Azira nodded slowly. This was the third group they had lost today. The Coalition fleet was dying piece by piece. For 3 years, the 17 alien races of the Coalition had fought against the Hive. The Hive ships were huge, strange things, part metal, part living creature. They moved like hungry animals, eating everything in their path. "How many ships do we have left?" Azira asked. "Less than 20% of what we started with," Officer Troll replied from the weapons station. His voice was flat. Everyone knew what this meant. They were losing. Not just this battle. The entire war. Through the main window, Azira watched as a Coalition cruiser exploded. The Hive swarmed over the remains like insects, breaking it down into pieces that disappeared into their massive ships. "Sentinel Station reports they are under heavy attack," Lani said. "They don't think they can hold much longer." Sentinel Station was their last major base. If it fell, the Coalition had nowhere left to regroup. It was over. 3 years of fighting, millions of lives lost, and dozens of worlds destroyed, all for nothing. The Hive would consume everything. "Commander," called Officer Zek from the sensor station, "I'm picking up strange energy readings at the edge of the system." "Probably just sensor ghosts," Azira said. "Their systems had been damaged in the last attack." "No, Commander. These are real." Zek looked confused. "And the Hive ships are stopping their attack." Azira turned quickly. What? It was true. The Hive ships had paused. In 3 years of war, no one had ever seen the Hive hesitate. They always attacked without stopping, without mercy. "Put it on the main screen," Azira ordered. The screen showed the edge of the star system. Space itself seemed to bend and twist there. Bright flashes of light appeared. "What is happening?" Lani whispered. Then they saw them. Ships. But not like any ships they had ever seen before. They were enormous, bigger than even the largest Hive vessels. They were dark gray with red lights along their sides. They looked like mountains of metal floating in space. 7 of these massive vessels emerged from the strange distortions in space. They moved with surprising grace for their size, forming a perfect line as they approached. Are they Hive?" Troll asked, his fingers hovering over the weapon controls. Before Azira could answer, Officer Lani called out, "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's not in any Coalition language." The ship's computer worked to translate the strange message. After a moment, words appeared on the screen. Words that Azira read with growing shock. "This is Admiral Helena Winters of the United Earth Defense Force. Stand by for assistance." Azira stared at the message. Earth. Humans. They were only rumors, stories told by traders from the outer systems. Some unknown species that kept to themselves, never joining the Coalition. Yet here they were. And their ships were moving directly toward the Hive fleet. "Commander," Zek said quietly, "the Hive ships are changing formation. They're preparing to attack the newcomers." For the first time in many dark months, Azira felt a small spark of hope. Everyone on Azira's bridge watched in silence as the human ships moved closer. Now they could see these vessels clearly. They were unlike anything the Coalition had ever built. Their hulls were covered with strange weapons and thick armor plates. "They're massive," Officer Troll whispered. "Each one must be at least 5 kilometers long." The humans called them Dreadnoughts. The name fit these war machines perfectly. Aboard the largest human ship, the Thermopylae, Admiral Helena Winters stood tall. She was an older woman with short gray hair and a face marked by years of command. Her dark blue uniform wore many medals and insignia. "Status report," she ordered her crew. "The Hive fleet is larger than our intelligence suggested." "Admiral," replied her second-in-command, Captain Rodriguez. The coalition has lost nearly 80% of their forces. Winters nodded. We arrived just in time then. She studied the tactical display. The Hive ships were regrouping, turning their attention away from the coalition remnants and toward the human dreadnoughts. They recognize us as the greater threat, Winters said. Good. Weapons ready. All systems green, Admiral, reported the weapons officer. Graviton beams charged and targeting systems locked. Winters took a deep breath. All ships, commence firing. Target their command vessels first. The human dreadnoughts fired as one. Brilliant blue-white beams shot from their forward sections. When the beams hit the Hive ships, they didn't explode like normal weapons. Instead, the Hive vessels seemed to crumple inward, crushed by invisible forces. On her bridge, Azura watched in amazement. What kind of weapons are those? She asked. Officer Zek shook his head in disbelief. According to our sensors, they're manipulating gravity itself. The Coalition tried to develop such technology for decades, but it was thought to be impossible. The Hive responded with a massive counterattack. Hundreds of energy bolts flew toward the human ships. Azura expected to see the dreadnoughts blown apart, but instead, shimmering blue fields appeared around them. The Hive weapons hit these shields and were absorbed. Then something even more incredible happened. The human shields glowed brighter, and the dreadnoughts fired again, this time with even stronger beams. They're using the Hive's own energy against them, Zek said in awe, redirecting it into their weapon systems. The battle continued for several minutes. Each time the Hive adapted their attack, the human ships changed tactics. They moved with perfect coordination, protecting each other and creating overlapping fields of fire. Suddenly, Azura's ship shook violently. A Hive destroyer had broken through and was targeting them directly. Shields failing. Troll shouted, "We can't take another hit." Before Azura could give orders, one of the smaller human vessels broke formation and moved between her ship and the Hive destroyer. It took the full force of the Hive attack on its shields. "They're protecting us," Lani said softly. Azura's communication panel lit up. A message appeared. "Coalition vessel, this is Captain Lee of the UED Defiant. Hold position. We'll cover you." For 3 years, the Coalition had fought alone against the unstoppable Hive. Now, these strangers, these humans, had arrived and were fighting with technology beyond anything Azura had seen before. And they were winning. Admiral Winters watched as the battle progressed. The human ships had surprised the Hive, but she knew it wouldn't last. The Hive was already changing its attack patterns. "It's time for the next phase," she told her officers. "Initiate Protocol Sanctuary." Captain Rodriguez nodded and pressed a series of commands on his console. "Protocol Sanctuary active." "Admiral." Aboard Azura's ship, the communication system suddenly came to life. A clear voice reached every corner of the bridge. "This is Admiral Helena Winters of the United Earth Defense Force. All Coalition vessels, listen carefully. We are creating a safe path for your escape. Move your ships to these coordinates immediately. We will protect your withdrawal." Along with the message came a set of coordinates. Azura studied them with a frown. "These coordinates, they don't match any known safe location," Officer Zek said. "Commander, more Hive ships are arriving," Lani reported urgently. At least 3 more motherships just entered the system. Azura made her decision. Set course for the human coordinates. Now, not all Coalition commanders were as quick to trust the humans. Many ships remained in position, their captains unwilling to follow strangers. The human dreadnoughts shifted formation. 2 of the massive ships moved to create a corridor of safety, while the other 5 engaged the new Hive forces. Now Azura could see even more of the humans' incredible technology. Parts of their ships actually changed shape during battle. Weapon systems rotated and transformed to meet different threats. When the Hive adjusted to the graviton beams, the humans switched to what looked like solid metal projectiles fired at impossible speeds. These simple weapons tore through the Hive ships like they were made of paper. How can physical projectiles do so much damage? Trull wondered. They're accelerating them to near light speed, Zek explained, checking his instruments. The kinetic energy is enormous. On the Thermopyla, a woman with dark hair tied back in a tight bun frowned at her displays. Dr. Ilara Voss was the fleet's expert on hive biology. Admiral, she called to Winters. The hive is adapting specifically to our weapon systems. They're learning much faster than we anticipated. Winters nodded grimly. How long do we have? Hours, not days, Voss replied. We need to get the coalition forces to safety before the hive develops effective countermeasures. Back on Azura's ship, they were now moving toward the human corridor. Other coalition vessels were finally following their lead. Through the view screen, Azura watched as a small hive ship broke through the human line and headed straight for a damaged coalition transport. Before it could strike, one of the human dreadnoughts fired a precise shot that split the hive vessel in half without harming the transport. Their targeting systems are incredible, Trull said with awe. That shot was perfect. More and more coalition ships were now following the humans' instructions, forming a ragged line as they moved toward the coordinates. The human ships continued their fighting retreat, holding back the hive just enough to let the coalition escape. Their movements were precise and coordinated, like a complex dance. Where are they taking us? Lunny asked quietly. Azura shook her head. I don't know. But right now, they're our only hope. As the last coalition ships reached the safety corridor, the human dreadnoughts began their final withdrawal, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed hive vessels. 3 days after the battle, Azura stood at a large window, looking at something impossible. The coalition ships had followed the humans to this location, a massive space station orbiting a dim brown star. The station was unlike anything she had ever seen. We call it Sanctuary Station, said a voice behind her. Azura turned to see Admiral Winters approaching. Up close, the human woman was shorter than Azura expected, but she carried herself with quiet authority. How did you build something this big without anyone knowing? Azura asked. We've been preparing for a very long time, Winters replied. Please, join us in the command center. There's much to discuss. Azura followed the Admiral through the station's wide corridors. Many humans were working alongside a few coalition personnel. They'd reached a large room where other coalition commanders were already waiting. A tall human man with dark skin stood before a holographic display of the galaxy. He wore a simple gray uniform with no markings. I am Dr. Sanjay Mehta. He introduced himself, Earth's diplomatic representative. Why have you humans stayed hidden all this time? Demanded Commander Krell, an old warrior from the Vorn species. The coalition has been fighting the hive for 3 years. Millions have died. Dr. Mehta nodded sadly. We've been watching the hive for much longer than that. They destroyed our first colony 70 years ago. This silenced the room. 70 years was longer than the coalition had even known the hive existed. We chose to remain hidden and build our strength, Admiral Winters explained. The hive adapts quickly to any threat. If we had revealed ourselves too soon, they would have developed weapons against our technology before we were ready. You let our people die, another coalition commander accused. Dr. Mehta touched his display. It showed complex calculations and probability models. Our simulation showed that early intervention would have resulted in total defeat, he said calmly. By waiting until the coalition was nearly defeated, we created the perfect moment to strike, when the hive was fully committed to their strategy against your forces. Azura understood the cold logic, even as it disturbed her. So you sacrificed coalition worlds to improve your chances of winning the overall war. Yes, Admiral Winters admitted without excuses. A terrible choice, but one we had to make for the survival of all. Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the station. A human officer rushed into the room. Admiral, we've detected hive ships approaching. They've found us. Winters turned to the coalition commanders. We can continue this discussion later. Right now, we need to defend Sanctuary. The command center transformed instantly. Screens showed the approaching Hive fleet, smaller than before, but still dangerous. How did they find us so quickly? Azura asked. Dr. Voss, who had just entered, looked worried. They're learning faster than we expected. They must have tracked our energy signatures. Admiral Winters began giving orders. All dreadnoughts to defensive positions. Coalition ships will form the second line. She turned to Azura. Commander, your cruiser has been fitted with some of our defensive systems. Will you join the fight? Azura nodded firmly. Despite her questions about the humans' methods, she knew they now faced the same enemy. We'll follow your lead, Admiral. As they hurried to their ships, Azura realized something important. These humans were nothing like her people. They fought differently. And maybe that was exactly what they needed to defeat the Hive. Azura's cruiser moved into position alongside the human vessels. Her ship had been quickly upgraded with some human technology. The engineering team had worked for hours installing new shield generators and weapon systems. All ships in formation, reported Officer Trull. The Hive fleet will be in range in 5 minutes. On her new tactical display, Azura could see the entire battlefield. The 7 human dreadnoughts formed the front line, with smaller human ships between them. The coalition vessels made up the second defensive line protecting Sanctuary Station. A human officer named Major Tanaka had joined Azura's bridge crew to help them understand the new systems. Your targeting computers are now linked with our fleet network, Tanaka explained. This will let us coordinate our attacks more effectively. The Major showed Azura how the system worked. It didn't just track enemy ships, it predicted their movements, identified weaknesses, and suggested the best targets. This is not how the coalition fights, Azura said, studying the display. Tanaka smiled slightly. You fought to defend. We fight to win. The Hive ships came into view, a swarm of dark, organic-looking vessels moving as one. But something was different about them now. Their shapes had changed, becoming more streamlined and armored. They've already adapted to our earlier attacks, Tanaka observed. They're evolving. Admiral Winters' voice came through the communication system. All ships prepare to engage. Remember your training. Stay flexible and adjust to changing conditions. The battle began with a massive exchange of fire. The human dreadnoughts unleashed their graviton beams again, but the Hive ships were more resistant now. They didn't crumple as easily as before. The humans immediately switched tactics. Their ships fired what looked like small black spheres toward the Hive fleet. When these projectiles detonated, they created strange distortions in space that tore apart nearby Hive vessels. What are those weapons? Azura asked in amazement. Controlled singularity bombs, Tanaka replied. Each one creates a momentary gravity well. On the Thermopylae, Dr. Voss was carefully monitoring the Hive's reactions. She noticed something unusual in their movement patterns. Admiral, she called to Winters, the Hive is showing signs of coordinated evasive maneuvers. They're not just adapting their ships, they're changing their tactics. Winters frowned. They've never done that before. The Hive always relied on overwhelming numbers, not strategy. I think they're afraid, Dr. Voss said quietly. They've never encountered an enemy they couldn't defeat through simple adaptation. Now they're facing something new. Back on Azura's ship, the battle was intensifying. Her crew worked alongside Major Tanaka, using their new weapons to target smaller Hive ships that tried to slip past the dreadnoughts. When a group of Hive destroyers broke through and headed straight for a coalition medical ship, Azura didn't hesitate. Intercept course, she ordered. Full power to forward shields. Her cruiser moved to protect the vulnerable vessel, just as she had seen the humans do for her ship during their first encounter. The Hive weapons hit hard, but the new shields held. 3 human ships quickly moved to support her, their combined fire destroying the Hive destroyers. Good work, Commander, came Admiral Winters' voice over the comm. That's exactly the kind of coordination we need. For the first time, Azira felt something new. The Coalition and humans were fighting as one force, each covering the other's weaknesses. And together, they were pushing back the Hive. The battle for Sanctuary Station lasted for 6 hours. In the end, the combined human and Coalition forces pushed back the Hive fleet. 2 human ships were heavily damaged, and several Coalition vessels were lost, but Sanctuary remained safe. After the battle, Admiral Winters called for a meeting with all Coalition commanders. This time, they gathered in a large room with a circular table. The walls showed images of Earth and other human worlds. "You fought beside us," Winters began. "Now it's time you learned the truth about humanity." Dr. Mehta stepped forward and activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a beautiful blue-green planet. "This is Earth, our homeworld," he explained. 200 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves in a global war. The display changed to show terrible destruction, cities in ruins, great fires burning, and millions of people suffering. "We used weapons that almost ended our civilization," Mehta continued. "Nuclear bombs, biological agents, orbital strikes. We came very close to extinction." Azira and the other Coalition commanders watched in silence. This was not what they had expected. "After the war, humanity changed," Admiral Winters said. "We united under one government. We promised never to fight each other again. Instead, we prepared to defend ourselves against threats from beyond our world." The display showed humans rebuilding, constructing massive ships, and creating new technologies. "When we discovered faster-than-light travel and began exploring nearby stars, we found something disturbing," Mehta said, his voice solemn. The hologram changed to show a dead world. It was completely barren, with strange structures covering its surface. "This was once home to an advanced civilization," he explained. "They were completely destroyed by the Hive. We found 16 other worlds like this one." Azira leaned forward. "You knew about the Hive before they attacked the Coalition." "Yes," Winters admitted. "We studied their patterns. We learned how they think, and we built our defenses specifically to counter them." A Coalition commander slammed his fist on the table. "Then why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you help us when they first appeared?" Dr. Mehta looked sad but determined. "Because our analysis showed that early intervention would fail. The Hive adapts to any threat it faces. If we had revealed our technology too soon, they would have developed countermeasures before we could strike decisively. We had to wait for the right moment," Winters added. "When the Hive was fully committed against the Coalition, their resources stretched thin. It was our one chance to make a real difference." Azira felt anger, but also understanding. "You let millions die to improve your strategic position." "Yes," Winters said simply. "A terrible choice we will always regret. But it was the only way to ensure that billions might survive." The room fell silent as everyone considered this harsh truth. Then Dr. Voss rushed into the room, her face showing excitement and worry. "Admiral, we've made a breakthrough in understanding the Hive," she announced. "They're developing the new form of faster-than-light communication between their ships. If they succeed, then no tactical advantage will matter." Winters finished grimly. "We're running out of time." She looked at the Coalition commanders. "We need to move beyond defense. We need to take the fight to the Hive's homeworlds." The silence in the room was deafening. In 3 years of war, the Coalition had never even considered attacking a Hive world. Over the next 2 weeks, Sanctuary Station became a place of great activity. Human engineers worked side by side with Coalition technicians to prepare for the coming battle against the Hive. Azira walked through a large repair bay where her cruiser was being upgraded. Human workers climbed over the hull, installing new weapon systems and stronger shields. Captain Morgan Chen, commander of the human Dreadnought Sentinel, was overseeing the work. He was a tall man with short black hair and a serious face. "Your ship will be twice as powerful when we're done," he told Azira. "We're adding our best defensive systems." Azura watched as a coalition engineer argued with a human technician about the best way to connect the new systems. "Your people have very different ways of solving problems," she observed. Chen smiled slightly. "Humans believe in debate. We think that disagreement makes our ideas stronger." This was very different from the coalition's approach. Coalition species always tried to reach peaceful agreement through calm discussion. "How can you function with so much conflict?" Azura asked. "That's exactly how we function," Chen replied. "Opposition creates strength." In another part of the station, Dr. Voss and several coalition scientists studied the hive's biology. The coalition experts knew many things about living systems that humans had never discovered. "Your understanding of bioneural networks is remarkable," Dr. Voss told her coalition colleagues. "This will help us develop better weapons against the hive." Meanwhile, human military officers trained coalition crews in new battle tactics. Where coalition forces had always focused on perfect plans and organized formations, humans taught them to adapt quickly when things went wrong. "No plan survives contact with the enemy," Major Tanaka explained during a training session. "What matters is how quickly you can change your strategy." He showed them simulations where everything went wrong. Ships destroyed, communications lost, weapons failing. The coalition officers were surprised when the humans deliberately practiced for failure. "We don't train for when things go right," Tanaka said. "We train for when they go wrong." Azura spent many hours learning about the human dreadnoughts. These massive ships were designed to keep fighting even when heavily damaged. They could lose entire sections and still remain operational. "We build redundancy into everything," Captain Chen explained. "Multiple engines, backup systems, compartmentalized areas. A dreadnought can lose 70% of its structure and still fight." One evening, Azura found Admiral Winters alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Do you think we can win?" Azura asked her. Winters was silent for a moment. "The hive has never been defeated before, but they've never faced humans, and the coalition working together." She turned to Azura. "Your people know things we never discovered. Your biology experts, your understanding of different species. Combined with our weapons and tactics, we create something new." Before Azura could respond, alarms sounded throughout the station. They hurried to the command center where Dr. Mehta was studying long-range tensor reports. "The hive is gathering a massive fleet," he announced. "They're pulling ships from all their territories, combining their forces for one huge attack." Admiral Winters studied the data and made a quick decision. "We can't wait for them to come to us," she said firmly. "It's time to take the fight to them." Admiral Winters gathered the fleet commanders in the war room. A large holographic display showed a star system with a greenish planet. "This is our target," she explained. "A hive manufacturing world where they grow new ships. Our intelligence suggests it's currently less defended because they're gathering forces for their main attack." She looked at the assembled officers, both human and coalition. "This will be our first strike against a hive world. 3 dreadnoughts will lead the attack, supported by coalition cruisers, including Commander Azura's ship." Azura felt a mix of fear and determination. No one had ever attacked a hive world before. "How did you find this target?" she asked. Dr. Voss stepped forward. "We've had small spy drones in hive territory for years. They're designed to look like parts of hive ships and gather information." The attack force departed the next day. 3 human dreadnoughts, the Sentinel, the Defiant, and the Valiant, led the way, with 15 coalition ships following behind. Azura's cruiser, now heavily upgraded with human technology, was designated as the coalition command vessel. The journey took 3 days, using a series of precise, faster-than-light jumps. Human navigation systems were far more advanced than what the coalition had developed. They could calculate jumps that ended much closer to planets and stars than coalition navigators thought possible. As they approached the hive world, Captain Chen briefed the coalition officers on their battle plan. "We'll use holographic projectors to make our fleet appear larger than it really is," he explained. "While the hive focuses on these fake ships, Our real vessels will attack from another direction. Azira had never heard of such a tactic. You can create images that fool hive sensors. For a short time, yes, Chen replied. Enough to create confusion. The attack began exactly as planned. The human ships projected dozens of false images that appeared on hive sensors as a large invasion fleet. As the hive defenses moved to engage these phantom ships, the real fleet approached from below the planet's orbital plane. The Dreadnoughts struck first, targeting specific structures on the planet's surface. These weren't random attacks. They were precise strikes against key hive control nodes. Azira watched on her tactical display as human weapons hit their targets with perfect accuracy. Unlike coalition attacks, which often destroyed everything in the area, the humans were incredibly precise. Why aren't you destroying more of their facilities? Azira asked Captain Chen through the communication system. We're not here to annihilate them, Chen replied. We're disrupting their ship production while preserving research opportunities. The more we understand them, the better we can fight them. The plan worked better than expected. The hive defenses were confused and disorganized, unable to mount an effective response. Within hours, the primary manufacturing centers were disabled. As they prepared to withdraw, however, something unexpected happened. New hive ships appeared, different from any they had seen before. These vessels were sleeker, faster, and seemed designed specifically to target the human dreadnoughts. They've created ships to counter our technology, Dr. Voss reported urgently. They're adapting even faster than we feared. The new hive ships launched a coordinated attack on the Sentinel, targeting its main weapon systems with disturbing accuracy. The dreadnoughts' shields flared as they absorbed the assault. All ships, prepare for emergency withdrawal, ordered Admiral Winters from her command ship. The mission is complete, but we need to leave now. As they jumped away from the hive world, Azira knew they had won an important victory, but the hive's rapid adaptation to human technology was deeply troubling. The race against time had begun. The fleet returned to Sanctuary Station with valuable information. The attack had been successful, but the hive's quick adaptation to human technology was worrying. Dr. Voss and her team analyzed the data from the battle. After 3 days of work, she called an emergency meeting with Admiral Winters and the fleet commanders. We've discovered something incredible, she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. The hive isn't just a collection of similar ships. It's a single organism spread across many vessels. They communicate using quantum signals, similar to our own communication technology. Captain Chen leaned forward. If they're all connected, does that mean there's a central control point? Yes, Dr. Voss replied. Our data suggests a central system with 3 planets. We believe this is where the primary hive consciousness exists, the brain of the entire hive. Admiral Winters studied the star map showing the location of this system. It will be heavily defended. More than any place we've seen, agreed Dr. Mehta. But if we can disrupt the central consciousness, we might be able to break the hive's coordination across all their forces. After much discussion, a bold plan was formed. The entire human coalition fleet would attack the hive's central system. All 7 dreadnoughts would lead the assault, supported by every combat-ready vessel they had. The night before the mission, Azira found Admiral Winters in the observation lounge again. This could be the end of the war, Azira said quietly. Winters nodded. Or the end of us. But we have no choice. The hive is gathering its forces faster than we expected. If we don't strike now, we may not get another chance. The next morning, the largest fleet ever assembled by humans, and the coalition departed for the hive's central system. Over 100 ships moved in perfect formation, the massive dreadnoughts at the center. They approached the system using a new human technology, dimensional displacement drives. These special engines briefly shifted the ships partly out of normal space, allowing them to bypass the outer hive defenses. When they appeared near the inner planets, they faced an incredible sight. Hundreds of hive ships formed protective layers around 3 green-black planets, These worlds were covered with strange structures that pulsed with energy. "All ships, commence attack," ordered Admiral Winters. "Remember your targets and stay with your assigned groups." The battle that followed was unlike anything Azira had ever experienced. The Hive fought with desperate intensity, sacrificing dozens of ships to protect the central planets. They swarmed the human dreadnoughts, attempting to overwhelm their defenses with sheer numbers. 2 dreadnoughts, the Valiant and the Guardian, were lost protecting the Coalition's smaller ships. The Thermopylae, Admiral Winters' flagship, took heavy damage but continued fighting. Azira's cruiser and several other Coalition vessels formed a protective screen around the damaged flagship, returning the protection humans had once given them. In the midst of the battle, Dr. Voss made a breakthrough. Working with Coalition xenobiologists, she found a way to target the Hive's quantum communication network. "Admiral," she called urgently to Winters, "we can reconfigure the singularity weapons to disrupt their network directly. We don't need to destroy the planets, just break their connection." It was a desperate gamble, but they had no other options. The remaining dreadnoughts positioned themselves in a precise formation and aimed their singularity weapons at specific points in space between the 3 planets. "All singularity weapons, fire on my mark," ordered Admiral Winters. 3, 2, 1, fire. The singularity weapons fired simultaneously. Instead of creating destructive gravity wells, they generated a strange pattern of energy that spread between the 3 Hive planets. For several long seconds, nothing seemed to happen. "Did it work?" Azira asked tensely. Then, across the battlefield, Hive ships began to change. Some stopped moving completely. Others drifted aimlessly. Some even began firing on other Hive vessels nearby. "The connection is broken," Dr. Voss reported excitedly. "We've disrupted their central consciousness. The Hive ships can't coordinate anymore." Admiral Winters didn't hesitate. "All ships, target the remaining Hive command vessels. Don't let them reestablish control." The fleet moved forward, now facing much less organized resistance. Without their central coordination, the Hive ships fought as individual units rather than parts of a greater whole. Many seemed confused, as if they didn't know what to do without directions from the central mind. The battle turned quickly in favor of the human coalition forces. After 2 more hours of fighting, the remaining Hive ships began to retreat from the system, moving in different directions without any clear pattern. "We've done it," Captain Chen said in disbelief. "We've actually beaten them." 1 month later, representatives from all Coalition species and humanity gathered on the rebuilt Thermopylae, now orbiting the main Hive world. The planet below was quiet now. Research teams carefully studied the inactive structures, trying to understand the complex organism that had nearly destroyed them all. Admiral Winters, walking with a slight limp from injuries during the final battle, addressed the gathered leaders. "The war is not completely over," she said honestly. "The Hive still exists in many places across the galaxy, but without their central coordination, they're no longer a unified threat. Many Hive clusters have become dormant. Some have even attempted to communicate with our research teams." Azira, now wearing the insignia of an admiral herself, stood beside Winters. The Coalition had promoted her after the final battle, recognizing her crucial role in bringing their forces together with humanity. "We faced extinction," Azira told the assembled leaders. "We survived because we found each other. Human strength and Coalition wisdom together created something greater than either alone." The formal ceremony that followed established the new alliance between humanity and the Coalition, no longer separate groups, but a single interstellar community. Together, they would monitor the remaining Hive clusters and ensure they never again threatened civilized space. As the meeting concluded, Admirals Winters and Azira walked to the great viewing window. Outside, new ships were being built, massive vessels designed by both human and Coalition engineers. They combined human weapons technology with Coalition biological systems in a way neither civilization could have created alone. "What do you think is out there?" Azira asked, looking at the distant stars. beyond the space we've explored. Winters smiled slightly. Probably more challenges, maybe more friends, possibly more enemies. At least we'll face them together, Azura said. In the distance, a new class of ship moved into view, larger than even the Dreadnoughts, with sleek lines and powerful engines. Its name was visible on the hull. Unity. Yes, Winters agreed. Together. The battle had been lost until humanity's Dreadnoughts appeared. The future had been secured because humanity and the Coalition had found each other. And now, united, they turned their eyes to the stars.